fantasy playoffs are coming. Here are the players you need to be adding off the waiver wire to guarantee yourself an undefeated stretch for the rest of the season. If you want to show your support on this video, go ahead and hit that like button. It means a ton to me, more than you would ever know. And make sure to stick around to the end of the video because I do have a list of defenses we can stream off the waiver wire that will put up some big points. Do not skip over that if you do stream. I don't want to waste your time. The number one urgent, I promise you, urgent ad of this week is going to be Jordan Mason. I hope you didn't drop him because we do have some bad news about Christian McCaffrey. It looks like he may be out for a good amount of time. He comes in, takes a pitch out of the backfield, goes down, non-contact injury, just takes himself out of the game, goes to the blue medical tent, doesn't return for the rest of the game, and now we have some news that it's a PCL injury in his knee. Possibly could be related to that bilateral tendonitis that he was dealing with earlier in the year, but regardless, it is not good, and now he's at serious risk for missing the rest of the entire season, let alone the next few weeks. There's only so much longer left in the fantasy football season, so even if he doesn't miss the rest of the season, there's a very, very good chance Jordan Mason just ends up splitting the rest of the snaps with him for the rest of the way, 50-50. Because what is the point? You look at the 49ers, their record is 5-7. If they lose the next few games, they're at the bottom of their division. There's no way they're making the playoffs. Why put Christian McCaffrey, a very good running back on a very big contract, in for a pointless season? Jordan Mason has a very good chance to play for the rest of the next few weeks, and they do have a positive rest of season schedule. We've seen how good Jordan Mason can be in his earlier stint as the RB1 when Christian McCaffrey was missing time. He was a top 5 running back in yards per touch, averaging over 20 carries per game and 100 yards on the ground. He got a little bit of usage in the receiving game as well. So Jordan Mason, stash him, start him even in your lineups. He's only rostered in about 38% of leagues, so you should be able to go pick him up. At this point, I would blow every single dollar of fab that I have left on him. Isaac Guerrero might be worth the stash if you are in deeper leagues. Jordan Mason is a free agent at the end of this year, so that could be a look, but I would still be going with Jordan Mason as my number one option. But if you do need a wide receiver, Adam Thielen, if he is available for you, is going to be a number one option for this week. He comes out, drops 23.9 fantasy points last week against the Buccaneers, 8 receptions for 99 yards. By all means, a great performance. And this offense is actually looking a little bit better. Ever since the Bryce Young benching and then putting him back into the lineups, he's pretty much woken up. Since his return in week 8, the Panthers are averaging 21.4 points per game on offense, but more importantly, Bryce Young is averaging 33.8 passing attempts per game. Those numbers suggest a ton of offense and upside compared to the earlier half of the year when they were really just inept on offense, which is making these wide receivers in Adam Thielen a top option of your waiver wire. Xavier Legette is still going to be an option here, but it looks like Adam Thielen is going to be that guy because we had some previous experience with Bryce Young. Despite last year, Bryce averaging less than 200 passing yards a game, Adam Thielen still managed to finish the season over 1,000 yards receiving. Now Bryce Young looks a little bit better. Adam Thielen seems to be that number one option after coming off IR. And guys, we have to remember, he's only played 2 games over a 70-80% snap share. There is a real chance that he comes into the last half of this season, absolutely dominates, especially in the fantasy football playoffs. And he has a very, very good rest of season schedule here, facing the Eagles, facing the Cowboys, facing the Cardinals, and the Buccaneers in the championship game. He just dominated the Buccaneers last week. It's a really good stretch of pass-first situations for the Carolina Panthers. But a running back here, unlike the other handcuff guys, Braylon Allen specifically is going to be one that you want to get your hands on for this week for a few key reasons. We look at last week. Breece Hall came into the matchup against the Seahawks dealing with a little bit of a knee injury, has 12 total touches. He did sit out some snaps because of probably that knee injury. He didn't play his full snap share, or at least what we expected. Yes, he was well over 50%. Braylon Allen was about 25% as well. But what's more important here, it makes you think if this injury does end up lingering for the next few weeks, what exactly is the future for this running back situation? Because they are far out of playoff contention right now. They have no wins. They are last in the division. He could seriously get slowed down here in the next 1 to 2 weeks. There's only so much longer in the NFL season, and Braylon Allen would be the beneficiary of that. There is a real world where he gets a consistent 50% of the snaps in week 16 and week 17, or even for the rest of the year, even if Breece Hall is completely healthy for that stretch as well. And you look into their schedule, they get the Dolphins this week, a top 10 matchup for fantasy points allowed to running backs. The Jaguars the week after that, first week of the playoffs, top 5 matchup for running back points. Then the Rams and the Bills, 2 more top 10 matchups for fantasy points allowed. Braylon has already been seeing about 5 touches on 20% of the snaps a game with Breece Hall healthy. If the Jets keep losing, there is a real world where he just gets full reign of this offense. You want to keep your top guys and stars in Breece Hall healthy. But at this point, Jonnu Smith is 100% a waiver wire ad that you need to be picking up on all your leagues. I was under the assumption earlier in the year that the Dolphins could pick up their offense and play the same style that they have been for previous years and even earlier in the season before before Tua got injured the first time, but that's just not the case here. We look into this offense. Since Tua came back into week 8, the offense has averaged 21.3 points a game. Like, that's not bad by any means, but more importantly, still 36 passing attempts a game. That's more on the higher side. That's top 10 easily in the NFL in passing attempts. But the offensive scheme, completely different from what we are used to seeing with this Dolphins team. They aren't throwing downfield nearly as much as they used to. Tua is only averaging 3 deep passes a game. That's less than 2 times their previous average. The defenses have realized how you have to play the Dolphins here. You have to keep everything in front of you. You can't let their fast guys get behind, and that's where the Dolphins really make their big plays, and they're just not doing that this year. Tua has discovered essentially the check down. If you look at Devon Achane, he's a top 3 running back in targets per game and receptions. That shows a direct correlation to that short yardage game. You look at Jonnu Smith, he's averaging 10 targets and 99 yards and a touchdown per game over his last 3 matchups. He's the tight end 5 in receiving yards. He's tight end 3 in yards after the catch, a top 2 tight end in almost every single statistic since their week 6 bye. They do get some negative matchups here as far as tight end points allowed in the next few weeks against the Jets, the Texans, the 49ers, the Browns, but you still can't be denying the success he's been seeing. You got to pick him up at this point on the waiver wire, but despite recency bias, we still do need to be adding and holding Will Dissly. I know he did not have a good game last week, surprisingly. In a positive matchup against the Falcons, he puts up 1 target for 0 receptions, despite playing a good amount of snaps, over 65%. Looking at those numbers, it looks like it's a 100% Will Dissly issue, a skill issue. He just didn't perform. But Herbert and this offense in total had a very down day as far as numbers go. Their lowest pass volume and yardage since week 3 of the NFL season. Dissly, he still led this tight end room in routes, in snaps. He's a top 10 tight end in yards per game, in yards per route run, yards after the catch. He's extremely efficient despite a bad game from last week. Hayden Hurst, his primary tight end competition, is out on IR for the rest of the year. That puts Stone Smart into this lineup. He got a little bit more run this week. He actually had 1 reception on 2 targets. That's 100% more targets than Will Dissly got. So what can you really say? But he's not anything as far as competition for him for the rest of the year. I don't expect it to be anything serious. We can't expect this team to continue and go back to their regular pass volume that they have been seeing over the last half of the season, which is a very good pass volume, top 10 in the NFL. But more importantly, the tight end fantasy point schedule for the rest of the season for them is very favorable for him. He gets the Chiefs this week. They're top 3 in fantasy points allowed to tight ends, followed by the Buccaneers, Broncos, Patriots in the championship game. But if you need a quarterback, Caleb Williams is going to be my number 1 option, but not the guy we're talking about in this video because he is rostered in over 50% of leagues. That guy is going to be Russell Wilson. In a rematch situation against the Cleveland Browns this week, we saw in week 12, we look back into that matchup, he didn't have a great game, 13.8 fantasy points. But you do have to remember that game was played in a complete blizzard. You cannot take those numbers out of anything. Last week against the Bengals, he put up over 400 passing yards, 3 touchdowns on 27.8 fantasy points. Absolutely amazing. Is that kind of performance going to continue every single week? No. He played the Cincinnati Bengals. They are known to be a terrible, terrible defense. They're allowing over 35 points a game over their last 5 matchups. It just is what it is. But in this Browns matchup this week, they're still top 10 in passing yards allowed to quarterbacks. It's a positive matchup all the way around. He's a top 10 quarterback in passing touchdown percentage per pass attempt, top 10 in red zone passing attempts, total yards and passing as well. Like, it's all good numbers for him. He is efficient and this team is scoring points. You want to be rostering him, starting him still. But now to my favorite part of these videos. We're going to be talking about the defenses you need to be stashing if you do stream. The options are a little bit slim this week, so if you do have a good defense, I would suggest you stick with them. But here are the defenses we need to be rostering if you do need them. The Titans are going to be the number 1 option. They get a matchup here coming into this week against the Jaguars, which is a serviceable one. The Titans defense themselves might not be amazing. They are pretty good against stopping the pass, but they get a matchup again against the Jaguars, who likely won't have Trevor Lawrence in this matchup due to concussion from the Texans last week. Mac Jones, he hasn't been bad in his starts for the Jaguars so far this year, but the offense is still underperforming, and he is still liable to turnovers, the offense as a whole as well. But taking it up a class to the Eagles defense, surprisingly, their roster percentage is still pretty low coming into this matchup against the Panthers. It's a great matchup, not as great as it was in the beginning of the year. Like we said, Bryce Young is performing a little bit better as of now, but still, the offense isn't great. They don't have a ton of wide receiver options, and more importantly, the defense for the Eagles has been dominating. We look at what they've been doing. They're only allowing 15.7 points per game to opposing offenses over their last 7, and their fantasy points are there to back that. They're the defense 10 on the year, but if you isolate over those last 7 weeks, they're averaging 11.7 fantasy points a game. They are a top defense. Everything is clicking for them. That is going to finish off this video, though. Thank you guys so much for watching. All glory to the man above, and I will see you in the video coming tomorrow about the waiver wire traps. You don't want to miss that.